Richard, and I'm the Sunday school teacher for United Church of Christ Junior 2 Sunday School. And this morning we have a special guest with us to share some enlightenment on this different aspect of pastoring. Reverend Peter has agreed to be interviewed by the Sunday school class, and he will share some of the questions, answer some of the questions that they have.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome, one and all, to our first ever press conference here at Redeemer United Church of Christ. I'm Reverend Peter Bauer. I'm the interim minister here for the church, and I welcome you all here this morning. And I understand we have some distinguished journalists from various news entities that are here that are going to ask me some questions. So without further ado, we'll take it away. Who would like to ask the first question? If you can introduce yourself and tell me what news organization you're from.
I'm Cass Pape, and I'm coming from KSAT 12. And how can you get the youth more involved?
That's a real good question. I would think that one of the ways you want to do that is to be able to kind of find out what young people are really interested in. It could be any number of things. It could be having to do with being able to have more fun socialization activities. It might be to be able to do some mission work in the community, either in terms of feeding hungry people or trying to do something better in terms of helping people who are lonely, or being able to provide clothing for people who need it. Or it might be able to do some more youth-oriented activities with other churches, and maybe even be able to do youth activities even on a conference level within the United Church of Christ.
And then, how can we build a play area and worship area outside from you?
Well, we have space here, certainly. So there's any number of ways that we could do that. We have space over here. Some churches have done a variety of things. They've put together a basketball court or a play area. Other churches have made it multi-purpose. They've done a play area. Some churches have even done what's called the labyrinth, which goes back to the Middle Ages, which is a way, a kind of a pentagon diagram that's in the ground, and which is a walking trail which people can use for all ages, not only youth, but adults and older people as well.
My name is Dallas. I'm from Channel 6. My first question is, how many schools do you need to go to become a pastor?
That's a very good question, because in the last 30 or 40 years that has changed. When I started, and this is going back to before 1975, I went to a 4-year university. I went to Portland State University and did a dual degree program in English and history with a minor in philosophy. Then I went across the country to Princeton Theological Seminary on scholarship, and I was there for 3 years. And that made me eligible then to go on and get ordained. Now, in 2020, it's still the same, however, the combination is different. You have people now who are going to university or they're going to college, but then they may not necessarily be a resident student at a theological seminary. Now these days, it's more common, interestingly enough, to have people do their theological training online. For example, we have Chicago Theological Seminary, which is one of the United Church of Christ affiliated seminaries that we support. They have a program now that's entirely online. So you can be sitting here in Zeal on a computer, and you can be doing your entire theological training online for a 3-year period. Also, we have another interesting development that's occurred within the last 10 years, is that we have a lot of what are called dual track programs. So we have people who are wanting to go into the ministry who are going to a school where they get a dual degree, where they get a master's in divinity, but they also get either a master's in social work or they get a law degree. And that here in Texas, the place that's really facilitating that is in Austin, with Austin Theological Seminary and the University of Texas at Austin.
Okay. Next question is, how many churches have you been to?
Well, I don't want to say too many. I've been to a lot. I've been to a lot of churches here in the United States, also in France, also in, also in overseas in Guam, also in Japan, elsewhere. The number of churches I've served here within the United States have basically been about 4.
I'm Allie from Channel 8 News. Where did you go to church as a kid?
Well, that's a real good question. Early on, I went to several. I went to a Methodist church. I went to an Episcopal church. And I attended first grade at Immaculate Heart Catholic Church in Portland, Oregon, which is still in North Portland. I think it's still open. We finally settled with the American Baptist Church, so I was at Grace Baptist Church for a while, and then I was at First Baptist Church, which was in downtown Portland, until I went to seminary in Princeton, New Jersey. And then when I went to Princeton, then that's when I became a part of the United Church of Christ, and I became a member of a church in Princeton called Christ Congregation, which is duly aligned between the American Baptist Church and the United Church of Christ.
I'm Grayson from Channel 4 News.
Hey, Grayson.
What do you think could improve the church now?
Well, based upon what I know, and I've mentioned this earlier, Redeemer United Church, I believe, is a real solid, cohesive, unified community. You have a long track record of being a multi-generational, very, very cohesive congregation, and you're very financially stable, and you've been very, very good in terms of ministering to the needs of the greater Zeal community. What I would see the potential for would be to try to develop some more outreach in terms of mission, whether it means maybe contemplating even maybe setting up a food pantry, being able to do some type of program to provide clothing to people who need it, some other things that would really, really put the church on the map in terms of doing outreach for people within the community.
What is the hardest thing about becoming a pastor?
About becoming a pastor, okay. Well, one of the things right now is money, is finances. If you're talking about now wanting to go to a theological seminary or a divinity school, the cost is getting prohibitive. These numbers just came about a year ago. If you want to go to Yale Divinity School now, and if you get in and whatnot, you're looking at paying $59,000 a year, unless you get a scholarship to underwrite it. So it's really becoming, unfortunately, cost prohibitive. I was really lucky. My grades were good, and I put in my application, and I didn't know if I was going to be accepted or not. I ended up getting accepted to Princeton, and I got my whole education paid for. I didn't put forward a penny. The entire thing was paid for the entire 3 years. That's pretty hard to come by right now. It's pretty much a real challenge to try to get through. People are having to take out a lot of loans. They're having to get into a lot of debt. So one of the good things about online education, although I'm not a total fan of it, one of the good things about online education is that it does make things more affordable, and people can take more of their time in terms of completing their school preparation to want to go on and become ordained.
I'm Weston from radio station 101.5. And how hard is it being a pastor?
Well, it can be very, very lonely. I've learned throughout 40 years of doing this that it's really good to have a group of good friends and supporters as much as you can, because depending upon where you are and depending upon what's going on, you can face criticism, you can face people who don't like you. On the other side of the coin, you can have a wonderful, wonderful group of supporters and a group of people within the congregation that you can that can support you. The thing you have to watch out, I've discovered, is being able to be friendly with people who are in your congregation, but not necessarily be really, really close friends with them. Because if you do that, then you run the risk sometimes of alienating other parishioners. So I've always been really, really careful and cautious about that. I really think, this is just Peter Bauer speaking, I really think that congregations and denominations need to really figure out and go out of their way to come up with programs of support for clergy and for clergy families, because the stress can be really quite severe at times, and especially it can put a lot of pressure on marriages, it can put a lot of pressure on ministers with their children as well. So the more you can institute some type of, appropriate days off, appropriate means of self-care, make sure that clergy get a sabbatical every 5 to 7 years in their contract, I think the better it is. The better you can keep ministers healthy, reasonably speaking, then the better it is for ministry in terms of programs for a congregation and for a denomination.
No other questions?
Anybody want to know what I've learned in the past 40 plus years?
Yes.
All right. What have I learned in the past 40 years? Well, I've learned that this was not like anything I thought I was ever going to be. Okay? I was, and I'm speaking from age, and I'm speaking from my particular place in time in history. I thought back in 1978 that when I graduated from seminary, that I was going to probably go to maybe a small church, maybe eventually become an associate minister on a larger church, and then become a senior minister of a large church, because that's what I was told at that time to expect. This was 1978. I was told that that would be the type of course I would take. Well, that didn't happen. Within 2 years, I was at a small, within about 2 years, I was at a small 2-point charge parish. So I was pastor of one church that was 125 members, and I was pastor of another church that was 95 members. They were duly yoked at that time. I was there for about 2 years. Then I went to San Diego, California, and I was on staff for a 4-generation Japanese American church in San Diego, and was there for about 2 years. And then I became a Navy chaplain, and I did that for 17 and a half years. And then I went back and got another graduate degree in social work and ended up doing that. So my life ended up going vastly different from what I thought it was going to be. It's been satisfying, but it's still been a challenge. It's still been, pretty much a struggle. So I've been telling people now who are going into this to really think about, okay, if you get called to a church, that would be wonderful, but if you don't, try to figure out some way that you're going to be able to support yourself. And so I'm very much a supporter of people now who are now going into ministry, who are doing a 2-track format, who are either doing, like, say, a Master of Divinity degree, but they're also doing a social work program, or they're doing a Master of Divinity degree, or they're also doing a law program. Because I just think that where we are now, at this place in time, that things are getting more and more complex. Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot more churches close because of what has happened with the economy and what is happening with the lack of church attendance. And we've seen a lot more people now go into the public sector. So we have people now who are doing non-for-profit work, and they're ordained, but they're not really working in churches per se, or they're not really pastoring churches per se. So that's been a whole different phenomena to witness in the last 40 years, as opposed to what I would have expected to see, to be sustained when I graduated in 1978.
What's the most rewarding thing you do as a minister?
The most rewarding thing I can do is that I love is to see the real change in people's lives. Okay, when I'm blessed to see that. I'll mention this in a sermon later. But one of the things that I can cite you an example for is that this happened with my first parish. I was just getting ready to start moving, and I was going to be moving out to San Diego from where I was in Morrison, Missouri. And I just finished services at the St. James Church in Morrison, which was about 125 members in a community of 200. Just getting ready to leave. One of my parishioners came to me. She's just in tears, crying. This is after the service. And we briefly chatted, and she said, I'm really concerned about my brother. He's really not doing well. He's really drinking really too much. I'm really, really concerned that something's got to be done to help him. And I said, well, let me see what I can do about that. So I made some phone calls, and across the Missouri River from where I lived was the Fulton State Hospital over in Fulton, Missouri. I found out that they had an inpatient alcohol treatment program, and through my calls and conversations, we were able to get her brother over there to be seen. He was admitted to the program. Happy to say he was able to remain sober. He was able to really turn his life around. And right before I was getting ready to leave, the same parishioner came to me, just all smiles, just very, very happy, profusely thankful that I was able to help her brother to get into this treatment program, which literally changed his life. So it's those things that, among other things, that I really, really live for. That's what really, really makes everything worthwhile in terms of, doing ministry for the church and beyond. Great question, thank you.
I know when I'm down and I need guidance, I come to you as my pastor. And also, when I have a friend that's down and they don't have a pastor available, I also would recommend them to you. But when you take the burden of all these people, the church and everything on yourself, who do you go to other than God but your fleshly people? Where do you go for support?
I have, like somebody who is running for office, I have, per se, my kitchen cabinet. I have people that I've already negotiated with, who I consult with, either who are professionals or who are not, who are my sounding boards, people who pray for me, people who I consult with. I have a friend of mine right now, I'm going to mention him this morning during the service. He's currently out in New Mexico. He's retired as a VA chaplain. He was a former Navy chaplain. He's now an author. He writes books, of which I've been helping him to edit, among other things. And he's one person that I consult with. There are other people that I consult with as well. I used to consult with a good friend of mine who was in Dallas-Fort Worth, who was also a social worker, and I would consult with him quite frequently. He unfortunately died of cancer about a couple of months ago. So he's not in the picture, but I try to find people that I can connect with, who I know, really, really support me and really, really appreciate the ministry that I'm doing.
What would have happened if Eve did not eat the apple? Yes.
I thought that was a fabulous question. Well, there would have been, in my humble estimation, there would have been, from the get-go, a different relationship between God and humankind. Because, of course, it's because of the story of Eve eating the apple that we get what? The whole concept of original sin. So, if we didn't have Eve eating, quote, the apple in the story, then it would follow that we might not have this whole concept of original sin. Now, it's really interesting because historians have said that civilization has been a non-stop running argument between St. Augustine, who was Bishop of Hippo in the 5th century, who was really a strong proponent of original sin, meaning we have sinned because of the fall that occurred in the garden. And then we have this other person over here by the name of Pelagius, who is out of the 2nd century, who said there is no original sin. So there's been this constant battle throughout history between those who follow St. Augustine or Augustine and those who follow Pelagius. If we don't have, in the story, if we don't have Eve or somebody else eating the apple, right, then we've got more of a Pelagian, what I would call Pelagian understanding of what a relationship would be between God and humanity, if that's making sense. Which would be an entirely different twist in terms, theologically speaking, on what the faith might look like.
Does God have a home?
Yeah, I would say God has a home, and that's the universe. God created all things. God created you and I. God is with us. God is in us. So yeah, God has created the universe. So that is God's home. And if you think of it that way, then it's really, really more pertinently important that we take care of what? The home that we're on, meaning the land where we're sitting, the air that we're breathing, the water that we drink. It becomes even more important that we take care of that.
One last question she asked was God the first person on the earth?
Well, if you look at what the narrative says in Genesis, whether you're looking at chapter 1 or chapter 2, it says that what? God created the heavens, God created the earth. That implies what? That a divine entity was present before all of this occurred. So if we're talking about before the creation of humankind, then that would indicate that the divine presence, the divine existence of God was here.